Justin Roberts, welcome to Security Halt. How you doing, man?
Good, man.
Look, anxious to dive into your story. It's I think you're the first chaplain we've had on the show, and your mission's deeply tied into something that is by and large one of the main focal points of what we do over here. So today, man, let's dive into it. How do we save lives? How do we keep people from falling deeper and deeper into the pit of despair, and then reach in and bring them out?
Roger that. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that the chaplains are often offset. They're thought of as just religion is over there, psych is over here, and then the two don't coincide, and that's often an outside perspective. Inside, chaplains were constantly working with psych people. We're working with counselors. We're working, a large bulk of the counselings is pastoral counselings by chaplains. And you're not supposed to know about it. You're not supposed to see it, because it's a ministry of confession. It's a ministry that is happening behind closed doors. You're not supposed to know about it. You're not supposed to see it. So that's often the perception that people have. They're just like, they don't have a whole lot of knowledge on it because they're not seeing it out in front. And, but, I was doing about 6 to 7 counselings per day when I was a chaplain on average. And so that you do have to have sort of a field craft of knowledge on how to set that stuff up, though. It's relationships. And that's one of the unique aspects that chaplains fulfill is you're there. A good chaplain is going to be present. A bad chaplain, you never see them because they're never there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been lucky. I've had a few good chaplains in the soft world. I don't even remember my chaplains in 82nd because they weren't around at all whatsoever.
Yeah.
But we had one amazing chaplain that was always in the team rooms, always coming by. Never made it feel awkward. Always made it feel like he was just there to hang out with the guys and provided a quick prayer and or a word of wisdom. And dude, vital aspect of recovery and healing and just daily azimuth check. Come to find out, for a lot of us, faith becomes this thing that is relegated to the backside of our journey because we go through some pretty hellacious trials, and then we realize the importance of not just cultivating the mind and the body, but the spirit as well, because it's tied in. As much as we want to say that it's not, or we want to push it away, it's very much part of your well-being, the mind, body, and spirit, those 3 pillars. So really good at cultivating the mind and the body while we're in. You go through a lot. You go to the gym all the time, but a lot of us don't go to the spiritual gym. A lot of us don't go to church. And for myself in my journey, that was the last thing that I had to realize. You gotta go back. You gotta figure out that aspect for you. And for me, it just kind of clicked one day. It just became that thing that I was like, okay, this is what I'm missing. And that's a common thread that I'm finding amongst a lot of guys.
It's interesting. There's different kinds of trauma. And I've noticed your tier guys, your kinetic guys, they'll often be very good at the bombs and the bullets. And then when it gets into the consequences of that, those guys that have denied that spiritual dimension often are trying to push away death. They don't want to think about it. They want to face it. So when I was in Ukraine recently, we went to the front lines, Donbass, Mykolaiv, Kharkiv, up and down the fronts. And his bloody, his roof, brutal. I was with a Marine and he was lockstep, just squared away dude. He had Afghan, Iraq. The bombs and bullets, I didn't mess with him. Went over to Kramatorsk Hospital and it was a chop shop. I mean, I was sleeping in a bay of just nothing but, broken dudes, bloodied up, bandages, all that kind of stuff. The room's completely filled with it because it's just mass caliber there, And so we're filming the amputation. And we get to this one part where this guy had shrapnel in his guts, and the doctor, just showed him the intestines because he was pulling out intestines, dropping on the ground. That broke the dude. He was like, "No, I'm done." He was like, "I'm going back," handed in his body armor. And I was like, okay, that's a different aspect of trauma, because he never made peace with the fact that we were going to a place that there's a lot of casualties, and it's a roll of the dice that's going to be us. And making peace with death. Sometimes people are pushing that away. The most the strongest point to be at is acceptance of it, making peace with it, and then pushing forward anyway. And that, I think, is a spiritual journey. The guys that are, denying that spiritual dimension are often trying to get numb and trying to push that aside, trying to find different ways of getting numb to avoid it, getting addicted to work, getting addicted to drugs, alcohol, whatever, getting addicted to something. And that's just a escapism to not have to face down these harder dimensions of reality. All cognitive issues, all psychosis comes from an inability to accept reality. And the spiritual dimension, that is a part of our reality, because we are going to die. So what's next? And how you make peace with that answer, and being at peace with death. It makes you better.
I don't fault that individual. That's
no.
that's
I
something.
didn't either.
Yeah, it's
I
fun.
was like, oh, that's okay,
You can Monday quarterback somebody, but to be faced with that much physical in your face trauma, like watching somebody just flayed open in the worst day of their life, like, that's going to affect you differently. And I would imagine you're not there as part of the U.S. forces. It's not Afghanistan. It's not Iraq. You're there as an individual, free will.
You can choose to go
home. It's a little different. Yeah, that's a little bit different. Yeah.
And it's like, man. And you're also not there with your brothers,
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if you're there with your brothers,
you draw strength. Yeah. You draw strength and bravado from those around you. It's easy to stay there.
You're not going to
and it's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what took you to Ukraine?
So I'm a filmmaker now, and when the war kicked off, I had a buddy who's an SF dude who kicked over there to start rescuing kids out of orphanages. And I was laying in bed after talking to him, and I had my daughter in my arms, and I was like, she's safe, she's good. There's all these kids out there that aren't, and the best thing that I can offer up is storytelling, film, what I do. So kicked out there about 2 months after the start of the war, and got plugged in with the Ukraine military. It was different, but really good dudes. They had really good hearts behind them, and some of them were really squared away. And so we kicked out to the front, and gray zone in Kharkiv, up and down the trenches in Donbass, Mykolaiv, just filming and trying to capture some of the stories. And like, there's 2 different projects I was working on. One was the frontline fighters, the heart behind it, and trying to capture like what's really driving them, what's really motivating them to do what they do. And then the second was humanitarian heroes. It was like a TV series. So the first was a film, the second is a TV series focused on the people who were making a difference on the humanitarian side. And so we got a guy who's like prior service SF engineer, and Ryan, and he kicks out there and he's removing landmines.
Brian Hendrickson. Yeah,
rock star. Great dude.
Guy.
Yeah. So there's all these heroes that people don't know about but should know about. You could tell me all day about the Kardashians, and like, you might not be able to, but almost everybody can name them. But who are the human beings who are feeding people, doing the most good on food, doing the best work when it comes to medicine, saving lives? Who are the people who are moving landmines, and how can we make them famous?
Absolutely.
By that. So that's what the TV series is about. It's called Do Good.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that I had a friend I didn't even know was there, and I remember seeing a magazine and he was on the cover of it. And I'm like, holy shit. Like the community is very small. And to see the amount of people from the soft community that have, just a little bit ago, he was a college student. Now he's fully kitted out and using all the skill sets that he learned in SF and throughout the rest of his military career to lead recon missions.
Yeah.
And that to me is both, you have to look at it from the perspective of like, fuck, I'm proud that you're over there doing your thing, but at the same time it's like, fuck man, like you deserve to take a knee. You deserve all the great things in life. And
Yeah.
I certainly want you to have a family, have kids, be a father.
That chapter.
Yeah, have that chapter. But it feels like we have a lot of warriors are picking back up and answering that call, which is difficult. It's difficult to sit there and see your friends want to go back in there, and you have to ask yourself, like, is this because you haven't fully let go of the idea, or you process something?
And there's some guys, it's like, I think you have to have a why. I mean, you raised your right hand for a reason.
Yeah.
So you have to have a why for that. And then there has to be that still small voice that says, okay, you need to do this. And then you listen to that, whatever that is, that guides your life.
Yeah.
I have a series of objectives that I'm trying to achieve. And like, so for do good, the concept is wherever it is the darkest, who is bringing a light, and you bring a camera to tell their story. That's it. Doesn't matter where it is. But that was my objective. When I was over there, I did see there was the good and the bad, because you get a lot of crazy actors over there. And it was funny, it's like, I'd play the game, is it a SEAL or is it as an SF, dude? Because like you see them walk and you're like, okay, that's a SEAL. Yeah. And then like you see this other guy, it's like, he just looks different, like SF, you know? So there's a lot of Americans who are hanging out there, and it's kind of cowboy. You know, it's Wild West. You know, there's not rules, regulations. You're kind of just doing your thing and making your own connections, kind of working your way into stuff, and then, you know, doing your stuff. And I'm an outlier. I'm a weirdo, but it's like a lot of Americans will sit and talk and kind of connect about what's going on, what's the latest. Sometimes guys are getting like price tags on their heads, you know, from the Wagner groups, and then the intel kind of funnels stuff out. And so it's weird land. But for some of those dudes, they can't put down the rifle. They don't know what else to do. They haven't done an identity shift. They never figured out how to become something else.
Yeah.
And so this is all they have. And so they're repeating it. But that's, I think, the most dangerous issue that we have is that identity shift when we get out.
Yeah. 100%. The purpose and the mission after. And it's not easy. Everybody has to take their turn going through that. Everybody, absolutely everyone, whether you're a private or lieutenant colonel, general, everybody has to go through that. Well, maybe not general. Those guys are
generals, especially. They just keep being a general.
They just go out and become, work for Deloitte and
yeah, they're still. I do the meetings with those, and I love those dudes. They're still general.
Yeah,
they're still operating with that concept. And
what about you? What? How did you come out of being a chaplain and going into filmmaking?
I always kind of was. My second master's is in writing, and so storytelling is always a passion. And so I grew up doing that, but I came from small town Texas. Didn't know that I could become a filmmaker. I mean, we could go into working with cows all day. I can tell you all about cow stuff, but I didn't know any film directors or people working in film, but I loved movies. That was a sanctuary for me, the theater.
Yeah.
I would say just as much as the church. And because that was a place where I would get lost into stories, and I loved stories. So I would say, even more religious about going to the theater than I was to the church. And so Cinemark Cinema 6, going there as often as I could, with people or without, I didn't care. I loved movies. And so for me, that was that place for me to figure stuff out. I grew up kind of rough life. Dad was a drug dealer, all that kind of stuff. So these sanctuaries for me, I got lost in stories. And so I continued working and writing, fell in love with writing in college, did that, but also loved photography, and put those two things together, photography and writing, and then you get film in the middle. So when I was in Afghanistan, Kunar province, um, at that time, very suicidal unit, a lot of problems and issues, and looking to connect as a chaplain, because like that can be the difference between life and death for some people. So, but I had to earn the right, to be spoken to. So I had a good first sergeant, Randy Wright. He's later became a command sergeant major. He's a legend in the 101st, just an incredible dude. I learned more about being a minister from him than I ever did from any pastor or in seminary.
Wow.
And it's because he was rough, he was foul, he would fish hook dudes if he was wrestling with them. He was a tough dude, but you knew he would die for you. You knew he would do whatever it took to take care of his dudes. I'm tearing up even while I'm talking about it. It's that love that he had.
Yeah.
Like he would go to whatever length for his guys. That is the heart of God. I have never seen anything more powerful than that. And it says, there's a scripture that says, no greater love has any man than this, that he's willing to lay down his life for his friend. No greater love. And another scripture says, God is love.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to understand the substance of God, it is that love. That is the singular distilled form of God, that love. And you find it with the dudes who are willing to die for each other. That is the heart of God. And it's preached more powerfully than any sermon, in any seminary, anywhere else. So it's like the dudes are, they're foul. You might not trust them with your sister. Got to be careful. If there's like we do this reunion every year in the 101st, and it's like at this reunion, there's like they bring out the kegs. There's something's going to get lit on fire. Some sort of fight's going to break out. There's going to be partial nudity. But it's the greatest dudes I've ever met in my life because of that love. Yeah. And so with Randy, he became my mentor, and he said, if you really want to connect with the dudes, go out with each platoon at least once on a combat patrol and be near the front during major operations. So I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And that earns the right to chat with them about the other stuff. And that did work. The second I would go on a patrol, my counseling load with that group would go up. And it was the heavy stuff, the real stuff. And then, but chaplains can't carry weapons, so I was given permission to carry a camera. So when I wasn't doing chaplain stuff, carrying a litter or whatever it was, then I was filming, capturing the stories. And the whole goal was to not get in the way, just let the dudes tell their stories. And then try to craft that into the best story I could. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the first film. Yeah.
Yeah. Who better to capture than the chaplain? Yeah. That's powerful, man.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. I would not have thought of that because, like I said, when I was, and there's something to be said about our infantrymen, our grunts. Shout out to all of you. That's our, I always say my time in 82nd, that was my undergraduate degree in warfare. That's some of the best leaders, some of the best friends I had moving on into the SF world. We all had that same lineage. Shout out to Flo, another paratrooper from 1st Brigade, 2504. There's something to be said about paying your dues. Not that there's anything wrong with being an 18X or, serving in any other capacity, but I always felt more assured in who I was and my skill set, knowing that I paid heavily in blood, sweat, and tears in the 82nd first, and learned like the importance of like what it means to get your ass chewed out when you fuck up. What it means to build trust and cohesion within a platoon, within a squad, and your team. Yeah. It's important. And being able to capture that from behind the lens, that must have been remarkable. What happened to that footage? What'd you do with it?
So that became a movie called No Greater Love. And the singular point about it is behind every act of valor is love. Like valor, love leads to valor. That brotherhood. So the more that brotherhood is enhanced, the more that brotherhood is built up, the more courageous that unit is going to be. Yeah. And when trying to help civilians understand what's beyond the uniform, the heart behind it, that's driving it. So that way they could understand, these people as human beings, not just automatons. And so put that film together. It won 11 awards at festivals, screened before White House, before Congress, went out theatrically. And then that kind of set up everything else I've been doing. With this last film, I did it about chaplains, but it was like those Medal of Honor chaplains, those guys that went beyond the call. I had one guy who's like up for sainthood, and he got a Medal of Honor, and made me feel like I was a shammer, like, okay, he's a good dude. I'm not going to compare to that guy, but he was a
can't compare against a saint.
Yeah, literally saints. Like, I'm just hanging out. But this dude was like at a POW camp in Korea, and he was sneaking out to go steal water and food. And instead of running away, he was bringing it back, sneaking back into the camp to bring it back to his guys. Wow. It's like Father Capon, freaking rock star, And it's like that kind of love. It's like, how can you not be this, like, okay, yeah, he deserves any award, accolade that guy can get. And like, those are the guys that I really loved and aspired to be, become a chaplain. So I wanted those stories told. So that film, Chris Pratt executive produced that one. And then it premiered at the Vatican. And it's part of that case. I'm not Catholic, so the sainthood doesn't have the same significance to me. But I know that it's a recognition of his love. Yeah. And I want that to go to the moon, Oh, and yeah. So this film was part to help advocate on that behalf. And so that went out to theaters. It's going to be out on digital pretty soon. And then we're
going to watch it. We're Catholics, and my wife does a great job of always giving me the latest info on who's becoming a saint or who's in the process. We just had a young man who was the first millennial that became a saint. And I remember my wife's always constantly like quizzing me and bringing stuff up when it comes to the canonization of our saints, and I'm just blown away by how much knowledge she has about our faith.
Father Capon, first U.S. military chaplain to become a saint, and it's like rightfully deserved.
Yeah, yeah. You don't do these big things just because it's duty. Like there is a bond in your teams and your platoon, and when shit hits the fan, when you have to do something big, you're right. It's love. You don't go to look when you get down to the meat and potatoes of policy and foreign situations. We don't deploy with this grandiose idea that we're there to make Afghanistan great again and Iraq great again. Like, we have a calling as a warrior, and we're there in very, it's tough situations. Wherever you align yourself politically, it's difficult. But the guys in the rank and file, the guys there, boots on the ground, they are there for each other.
Yeah.
End of the day, that's the mission. Get the boys home.
Yeah.
Everybody comes home. And you have to sell that, and you have to mean that with all your heart. We're all coming home. Unfortunately, we know that that's not always certain. But damn it if we're not going to try.
Yeah. And I think that is the strongest force in the U.S. military. It's like that brotherhood, sisterhood.
Yeah.
And kind of going back onto the mental health side, it's like, if we want to fix the problems that we're facing, we have to give that more space and attention. Like, that is our path. That is our most singular strength. And it is also our path to healing. But there has to be that type of transparency in the unit that you can talk about your problems and issues. And it has to be an intentional conversation.
Yep.
Because like most dudes would rather die than look weak, literally.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know. I know from experience. It's the hardest thing to admit. The hardest thing you can do, that's also the most freeing and most powerful thing, is to be vulnerable. But how do you do that when you're living amongst legends, when you're serving amongst men that are at the highest echelon? They're the strongest, the fittest, the best of the best. And you're sitting there wondering to yourself, like, how do I ever admit that I am dealing with something that I'm ashamed of, that I can't explain, that I have no ability to verbally explain to anybody or want to? How do I continue walking amongst them?
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of us men deal with. And it's so hard to advocate for vulnerability, for taking a knee. It's difficult because guys just want to keep going, but sooner or later, and this is what I say for the GWAT era veterans, you're gonna meet this obstacle. We all have to address this issue. We all have to sit down and do the work.
Yeah.
It's gonna come to us. Everybody that sees warfare from a first person view in live. Well, nowadays with the advent of the internet, we can all get a view of it from what's going on in Ukraine, and that does leave a mark. But for our veterans, for everything that you've done and everything that you've gone through, at some point you got to talk about it, and that's difficult.
And if you look at like the degrees of emotional growth or individuation, and so we're talking about optimizing, like how to become the ultimate person, the ultimate version of ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And you got the different dimensions: physical, spiritual, emotional, all this stuff. As you know, war fighters, they often master the physical, to a far degree. They're extreme, and they're professional field craft. They become excellent warriors. But to become that full person, full leader, fully connected as a unit, there has to be that transparency.
Yeah.
Because it's not like it's not there. And it's not like every single individual has these different struggles and issues. They're all different. They're all like personally crafted for you. Your fuck ups are your fuck ups, and that has to be dealt with. But it is best dealt with as a team, just like everything else. Like you have to have these other people who are looking at you saying, okay, I see this side. I see that. Okay. It takes that other person to help you extract those things, find solutions that you don't have. And sometimes you have solutions they don't have and vice versa.
Yeah.
I was never just the minister, and it was always like pouring down in this way. I don't function with that ego. It was always this. It's like, I'm coming to you as a friend, and that's it. I get to be the Ferris Bueller. Like, just, I'm here to hang out, man, and fix your problems. And I don't have a gun, but I'm going to carry something, right? And so it's that type of teamwork to take each other to that next level, whatever that is. And so if you're dealing with an addiction, it's because you're covering something up. And so it's going to have to take a brother to say, hey, man, what are you covering up? What are you what are you trying to hide from? You're going too deep into the bottle, and it's time to come out. And a real brother will do that. So like with that unit, that's what we focused on. The one that was suicidal was focusing on the brotherhood. It was mostly dudes.
Yeah.
And how do we have those intentional conversations without judgment? And it worked. It was really effective. And it wasn't me who fixed stuff. It was the brotherhood that fixed it. And I was amazed by that. But yeah.
Yeah, it's addiction's a tough one, right? It's as much as we don't want to admit it, that individual's still ultimately in charge of getting himself out of that prison. And we've lost a lot of friends on the show that didn't want to get help, and it's the individual has to make that choice to be vulnerable and be willing participant in that recovery process. And that's the part that sucks, because you can walk through. I mean, we've had some good friends that, we got to treatment centers, we got them to a good place, and then they relapse. And then you'll be amazed at what people can hide, and they can get really good at wearing that mask again. And that's kind of all the things that I've seen and lost friends for. Addiction is the hardest one to accept, that you sometimes you can't have a say.
Yeah.
A lot of times that alcohol or the pill addiction is something that can easily come right back. And that's a tough fight. That's a tough loss.
It's like,
go ahead.
No, I was just thinking, it's like I've never tried alcohol, never tried cigarettes, because my dad was a drug dealer, and because of all that stuff that I saw, I was like, whoa, I can't, because like I was like so afraid, like deathly afraid. It wasn't out of righteousness or like trying to be anything. It's like deathly
You
afraid
saw it.
of that road. Yeah, because I saw it. And the same thing, like I've had too many friends went down that road and got lost and didn't come back. And that one of the things I had to deal with was like a messiah complex when I first became a chaplain, thinking I could save people.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah. No, I honestly, I
I had a buddy
and
who was
that's
like, "You
for
think
any,
you're
I think
Jesus, don't you?" And I was like, in tears,
you're
like,
the chosen one.
"Ah."
Yeah. No, I think anybody that's an advocate or a peer-to-peer support or somebody that's championing a cause, that after they've gotten better, I know I felt like I could just bring everybody along this recovery, and sometimes the last thing somebody wants to hear is that you have a resource for them, and
Yeah,
they won't always be polite about it.
no,
Some people aren't ready, and
no,
that's hard.
no. It's like you just figure out where a person's at, and then just like love them there, and then it's like you just that's the only thing I could do. You know, like
Yeah.
I kind of hit my wall because um, I had this one dude who's like, "Hey, champ, can I talk to you?" Like it was like on a Friday, and I already had a counseling session booked, and I didn't want to drop off that other dude, so I was like, "Oh man, that's like, can I hit you up on Monday? Are you gonna be okay?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna be okay." So of course he tries to kill himself on Saturday, and I was like, "Fuck," you know, like that broke me. I hit a wall because it was like suicide, 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 like all these
Yeah.
problems, and I wasn't good enough to fix it. I wasn't enough. And so I was like at Fort Campbell, pulled into this car wash area, and I'm heaving, you know, like it's like snot and tears, like everything coming out of me. Like, God, why won't you fix this? Why won't you let me fix this? Why can't I be on top of this? And it was a couple of days later that I had a dude, another chaplain buddy, who called me out on that. And he's like, "You think you're Jesus? You think you're God? You are not." It's like you can only love them where they're at, nothing more. And it's going to be their choice. And you also
Yeah.
have to still love them when they make the wrong one. And I was like, oh, that's hard. That was like a punch in the gut. Because like I
Yeah.
know if you're doing something self-destructive, like I want to choke you, you know, but I was like, oh man, it's like, but how jacked up am I? You
Yeah.
know, and God still loves me. And so I just kind of had to become at peace with that. And that made it so that took a huge, like 50 pounds out of my rucksack.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we're just
That's a
going to love
painful.
people. Yeah.
That's a painful lesson. I think our caregivers, our support networks are out there. A lot of people, if you're listening and that's an aha moment for you, trust me, like it's you feel guilty when you don't answer that 2 a.m. call because you just went to bed after getting somebody else plugged into a resource. Like you can't save everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You can't. You can't be everything for everyone all the time, all at once. It's impossible. You got to sleep. You got to eat. You got to take care of yourself, or you're going to fall down that same downward spiral.
Yeah.
And just like you said, like you're not Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
You're not the most powerful being. You can't. You're not going to make them not do something. As much as it hurts to accept that you cannot change somebody's mind. You can be there. You can love them. You can support them. You can give them the best advice. You can connect them to resources. You can do the Googling for them. You can literally drive them to that treatment center. But at the end of the day, like they have autonomy. They have a choice to make for themselves. Like, and that's the hardest thing when your friend doesn't make that choice that you want them to make. And you still got to love them. And you got to mourn them now because they're not here. That's what sucks. And it's hard to accept. And you got to go back and you got to pray about it. You got to understand that you don't have control. You don't have control.
That's painful. And just loving the broken, even if they might not ever change.
Yeah.
Like
that gets yeah. That hits close to home. That hits so damn close to home. We lost another friend, and three of us all going through our own process of trying to understand, like, fuck, like, what more could you do? Like, you know that you were always there. You know that you provided peer-to-peer support. You listened every single time, connected them with jobs. You got them out of bad situations, but ultimately they made a choice.
Yeah.
In this part of your life, sitting here, how do you continue fighting and advocating, not being part of the organization, not having that seat within the organization as the chaplain?
Mm-hmm.
How do you go about it now?
That's a good question. It's still pretty much the same because my circles are always filled with people. I still have people reaching out to me. So my job hasn't changed as much. The battle rhythm has changed.
Mm-hmm.
I'm spending more time working on films, writing, storytelling. But, the ministry of Jesus was pretty simple in its design. He walked around doing miracles, helping people. It was always focused on meeting the need, helping somebody with their problem. And then he would share a story. And it's so funny because, like, they would even, the apostles confronted him, like, why do you speak so much in parables? It got to the point that the guy was always speaking in so many stories. They're like, dude, like, why all the stories? But that is how people get stuff. That is how people, you could give them a PowerPoint presentation. It means nothing. If you tell them a story, it has a possibility of sinking in on multiple levels and changing their whole paradigm.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't intentional. I had this aha moment later, but I was like, the way he went about it is somewhat how I've tried to structure, the way I'm going about it, just because I'm a storyteller anyways. And so that is, I can reach more people that way. Now, it's not, if I could still be a battalion chaplain, I loved it. Like that was amazing. 9 to 5. I'm not 9 to 5. It was all hours. But having that, I loved that job, because you're just hanging with the dudes, fixing problems. And you got to see those, a lot of those things fixed and people growing. And that was incredible. But now, just the way that my life has gone, it's now storytelling. It's trying to reach a broader audience. And like the whole vision of like No Greater Love was that one dude who is out in the back 40. He's not going to talk to his friends. He's not going to talk to his wife or anybody else. And he's been through too much stuff. And he's at the end. And I wanted to reach him. I wanted the whole film to be designed for him. That he would watch it. He would see dudes like himself who went through that same journey. And then here is how they found hope. So I designed the whole story for that one dude. And so that's the way I'm going forward. It's like using film storytelling to reach people, reach wide audiences, but also that one person that we might not be able to reach, and with the hope of giving them hope.
Yeah. That's perfect. That's the way to go about it. Just speak to that one person that's in need.
Yeah. So, but I'm also lucky too. It's like I'm still getting to hang out with a lot of combat veterans in the military. It's just the way life has gone. So, still, still finding myself sleeping next to a javelin ever so often, and like listening to the dudes having snoring contests. In a smelly place, and it's been an interesting journey. So it still feels like I'm in, but I'm out, but I'm in.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see what this life might take me next too, because we've got future conflicts going on. So if I keep on telling stories about conflicts, then I might find myself out there.
Yeah, I hope not. I hope.
Yeah.
Man, I was foolish to think that we would be able to take a knee.
No.
That our generation of guys would finally be able to listen to shows like this that promote the idea that your greatest calling is to be a father, to be a husband, to help coach and mentor the next generation. That's what arguably made us great as a nation. We had fathers that were present. We had people that were involved in their community. We're so against that these days. We think that these spaces are not for us. That somebody else will figure it out. Somebody else will take
Yeah.
care of it. No, the person that needs to take care of it is you,
Yeah.
the veteran that's
Yeah.
been missing for 20 plus years. And so that's why I'm constantly advocating, but I'm seeing the world continue to become a more complex hotbed of conflict, and more men and women are going to find themselves needed in these spaces. So are you going to find yourself in Ukraine anytime soon, or are you done with that?
Yeah, I'll go back. I still have stuff I've got to finish over there. I was going to say a saying popped into my head. I came up with a long time ago, but the two most consistent sounds in human history are the beat of the heart and the drums of war. And it would be weird if we didn't have another war. Just looking at human history, it would be.
I'm all about weird, man. I'm all about weird.
I know, but that would be a phenomenon that's not likely, and it's tragic that we're that way.
Yeah, it just needs to end. It really truly does. The conflict in Ukraine needs to end.
And there's guys right now out in Burma, fighting beside that revolution, doing good stuff. There's actually a chaplain out there that put together the Free Burma Rangers SF chaplain.
Yeah. I'm trying to contact with those guys.
Good,
that story's amazing.
Yeah. So I think like all around the world, there's a lot of good dudes who are fighting for freedom, who are fighting against evil. They just took the skills and trades that they had and they started applying it against the enemy. And so that's where my heart's at like right now. But you know what? Balancing family as well, that's hard.
Yeah.
It's no joke. And the whole point of the first film is explain to my daughter why this was important. And I even recorded her, and not a whole lot, not like an interview or anything like that, but just it's a letter. The whole film is structured as a letter from a father to a daughter from the front lines in the trench. And I'm literally talking from the trench. Why is this important? And it's not just important like for Ukraine and me being out in Ukraine, but every soldier who serves, every father who's a soldier. Why is this important? And it comes down to we have to fight against these forces that are trying to craft an evil world. It's not a better time. We're not living in safer times. The struggle is very real, and it's insidious and everywhere. Creeping into our democracy, creeping into every nation. This fight for dictatorships and control versus empowerment and justice and democracy. And so I see that conflict going on, and good men have to rise up and they have to fight. And it's needed because the second that they stop, that's when evil starts to win. And so I'm interested to see how these future conflicts come up because I see that the drumbeats of war are starting to escalate.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
El crescendo.
Yeah. Anytime you see defense tech companies popping up every 4 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And shout out to Anduril because those ads are like a Marvel movie.
They're about to. That might be stock worth buying here soon.
If you're not investing in Anduril, Palantir, a few others, they're
going to be hot.
You need to. Yeah,
that's job security right there. So. Yeah, it's like I might kick out to Soft Week too. I went there a couple of years ago, and I got asked to come back.
Nice.
But it's interesting what's around the corner, and then kind of deciding like how do we want to weather this tempo. I think the calling to go out is a calling, and the calling to not go out is a calling.
Yeah,
it's the worst thing that we face is false guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like I call it the totem pole of guilt. And you have a civilian. I've had plumbers and doctors and lawyers explain to me why they didn't become a soldier. But I've never explained to a plumber, doctor, or lawyer why I didn't become a plumber, or doctor, or lawyer. Never did. And it's like I never went to a plumber like, I was thinking about doing that in college. As I was maybe wanting to be a plumber. Yeah. So it's never happened. And so but then on the next level, you have guys who like served like in the Cold War or stuff like that. They never went over, never had anything going on, and they say like, "Hey, I didn't experience that." You have the guys who deploy, but they never heard shots fired in anger. They tell you that. You hear those guys shots fired in anger, but they just see the intense stuff, the regular stuff like you did. They'll tell you that. And then you have up that totem pole of guilt, you go. And you've got guys who never got wounded, but they had a buddy did. Maybe they should have been there for them. Maybe they should have done more. Why didn't they do more? Ooh, guilt. And then I even have a buddy, Linscog. He was a medic. Like, he charged out, was fixing a dude, and then took a bullet above his side plate, bounced around his body. He knew he was dying. And even as he was dying, he was telling guys how to fix themselves.
Yeah.
And then his last words were, "I'm sorry I couldn't do more." Like, he was at every single Bible study. Amazing, amazing dude. But his last words were, "I'm sorry I couldn't do more." And so you, on that totem pole, every level you have this guilt. Even if you're dying, you still feel like you wish you could have done more. And so none of us are free from it. We just have to accept that it's false guilt.
Yeah.
We don't have to own it. It doesn't have to sit in our rucksack. We have to let it go to be free. And I even had a buddy who wrote a suicide note to his wife and 2 daughters because he felt so guilty he wasn't there. And there's no way he would have been there for one of his guys, one of his friends. But his friend died and he wasn't there. And like his friend would be like, "Man, can't believe you weren't freaking there for me." He would have like that angst. The dead don't want us to like stop living our life. No. They want us to move forward and let go of the guilt. So that's the totem pole of guilt. And it's like we find everybody on it, but we have to let it go.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's one of the most important things that we can take away from this episode. You got to let go of it.
Yeah.
They want you to live. They want you to thrive. They don't want you sitting here surviving. It's just, you want to really make it up to them, have an amazing life.
Mm-hmm.
You really want them to look down and be happy, live a fucking epic life. You owe it to them. Live great. You have to do it, even when you don't want to, because they need you to. They're looking down.
Then they would want you to raise your kids. They would want you to raise your kids, live your life, enjoy it. You know,
cherish every moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Justin, thank you for being here today, brother. I really appreciate this. If people want to connect with you or look at your films or see your past work, where can they go?
Yeah, it's echobravoproductions.com. That's Echo Bravo Productions. And that's where most of my projects are at right now. And I'm on Instagram, social media, all that kind of stuff, LinkedIn. So I'm easy enough to find. But I'm not like a social media influencer or anything like that. I'm just a filmmaker.
Just a filmmaker, no big deal. You're too humble, sir.
I think there's some people online who are like social media extroverted. Yeah. I'm like a social media introvert, you know. I do a movie and I get away. Yeah.
Well, for you guys listening, go ahead and pause right now, go to the episode description, click all those links and send this man a LinkedIn friend request or Instagram friend request and make him be social on there and be active so you can promote his work and his films. Justin, I can't wait to have you back on so we can dive more and then go deeper into faith and the spirit and tap into your journey. So I think I need to have more talks with chaplains. I think it's important to really elevate that last pillar that for all of us just seems to have fallen by the wayside. I don't know if it's culture, I don't know if it's the way we're raised, we push away the faith, but I'm living proof that you can find your way back to God, back to your religion. You don't have to be a Catholic like me. I certainly do wish you would, but find your own path, find your own religion. I'm Deny Caballero. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you all next time. Till then, take care.